So welcome to today's class. You're looking forward to doing some clouds?
Yes, very much.
Good.
Yep.
Good. Yeah, it's a thing, isn't it? I always wanted to learn to do clouds too, and it's probably one of my favorite things to paint. And it takes a lot longer than you expect, depending on the kind of clouds you do. So the first clouds we're doing today are cumulus. Yeah, so they're the thick ones. So you'll have your notes there, which looks like that. Oops, I can't work out where to put things when I'm doing this. So that's one page. Day 2 we're on today. So day 2 of our 5-day course.
Yep. And
there's a little bit of a write up there about clouds and what colours and things you're going to need today. And then these are the pictures that we're doing. So we're going to do 2 different kinds of clouds. This is cumulus here, so thick, fluffy ones, and then cirrus, which are the wispy ones. And cirrus are the ones that are sort of governed by the wind. So, and then your cumulus are kind of more full of rain, I guess. Yeah. So we're going to do 2 today, and what you'll need to have on hand are 2 bits of paper. So doesn't really matter what colour, something sort of light to mid-tone is ideal. I've got this blue colour. Yep, that's perfect. Perfect, Louise.
Am I better off with that? I've only got that, or sort of, oh, where am I?
No, that's fine.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine, Karen. Yep,
otherwise,
no
I've got a
problem with
white.
that. Yeah, lovely. And yeah, and so we'll get started. So hopefully my camera will work. I did do a test run. It did work. So let's see if it'll actually do it again for me. And then I'll talk about colours and stuff, and we'll get into it. So just bear with me while I stand up and make this work, hopefully. Here we go. You're going to work for me? Yes.
There we go.
Hallelujah. Excellente. Rightio. That's my camera, so I'll just zoom in a little bit. Just make sure that's going to fit on the screen nicely. So that should fit well there, and adjust my focus so it doesn't keep wiggling all the time. It's lagging about 2 seconds behind what I'm saying, but we should be fine. All righty. Yeah, it's a few seconds behind. So
okay,
what
gives us a moment to take it in.
Yeah, stupid thing. Oh dear. All right, so I'm just going to mute everyone if that's okay. And,
Sure.
if you have questions, as yesterday, if you have anything to ask or talk about, please unmute and speak to me, and that way, yeah, we can get through the class that way. So don't be afraid to speak up. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you. All righty. So here we go. On my paper here, table here, you can see I've got my paper. I'll just remove one of those because we'll need that for later. So you should have 2 sheets of paper, pastel paper that is. So this is a colour fixed paper. It's quite gritty. If you scratch it, you can hear it sounds like sandpaper. So the reason we want the gritty paper with the texture is because we need the pastel to stick to it. I'm just going to tape down my corners. So same as yesterday, I've got, oh, missing one, little bits of blue tape on the corners there. You're welcome to tape all around your page, whatever you prefer to do. I just like it on the corners because I can kind of reuse those then for the next class, and I'm not using up too much tape. If I'm doing a serious painting on an easel, then I will usually tape all around the edges so that my edges stay nice and clean, and then when I can take it off later, it means that I've got a nice clean edge around my painting that doesn't get pastel all over it, and it just looks a little bit tidier, and it's nicer for framing as too. You can see I've got dirty fingers already. I've already marked my paper there. Never mind. So that's your paper, and you want to put that onto a little board so you keep it nice and still and flat, and you don't have to use your other hand to hold it while you're working. Our notes that we just discussed, so I've got that here next to me. What we want to do is flip your page over and have those images in a spot where you can easily see them. I also have it on my other iPad, which is over here. So that's next to me on my computer desk, so I can glance over at that to look at the image as well. So I like to have reference images everywhere. You'll find if you have it on a screen, it's got different colors. I'll just bring that back to show you again. So you can see on the screen, it's a lot brighter than what's printed. So often when you print images out, they come out a little bit duller because it's a different combination of ink colors, etc. And on your screen, or your phone or your computer, it'll be a lot brighter. So I like to work with both, really, but I think you get a better picture on a screen. So that's why I like to have those two options sitting there. You can also zoom in on the screen and get up nice and close if you want to see detail, which you can't do on a print, although I have been known to try and do this. Has anyone tried to do that on a print? Yeah. Okay, so have all those things handy and easy to see. I like to prop them up in front of me so I don't have to move my head too much. So I'm just folding this over, and then I'm just going to prop that up here in front of my computer so I can see it nice and easy. Right. So I talked in the notes about what colours we need to use today. So I've got a few in my little kit here. I've got a spare bit of black paper there. So I'm just going to show you or talk through the colours. So this is my favourite blue. It's just delicious. This is an ultramarine blue, and that's probably about the darkest of the blues that we want to be using today. You may have a piece of paper that colour, which is great. And that will be used in the background on the sky. We're going to do two blues in the sky. So normally when you look at a sky on a bright blue day, you'll find that the top of the sky is slightly darker than the bottom. So the bottom of the sky or around the horizon is usually a little bit lighter where it comes down near the earth. So they're the two blues we're going to use in the sky. So they're kind of a dark and a mid blue. I don't know what their names are because I always peel the labels off and then I can't remember what they were. I've tried to put my colours down here in order of tone. Remember we talked about tone just before. So tone is working from light to dark. Now I've also got some grey because in this big picture of clouds, we've got a fair bit of grey or dark. So I've got a darkish grey and a lightish grey. So they're my two greys. If you don't have light and dark, then just grab one grey. We can kind of work with whatever you've got. I picked up another little blue. It's sort of a mauvey kind of a blue, which is quite lovely. So when you are painting something like this, you really want to look carefully at your colours and your tones and figure out, there's a bit of purple in there. There might be a bit of yellow or all kinds of colours. It's amazing what colours are in clouds, and that's because they're actually reflecting the earth. They're reflecting what's coming up from below. So sometimes you'll even see greens and purples, beautiful colours. Okay, I grabbed a few more. I'm going lighter and lighter here. I grabbed another blue. Now that's a full length brand new pastel. That's an Art Spectrum. So if I use that, I'm going to want to break it because it's too long to use like this. Unless you're actually just drawing, which you can do. You can do fine lines like this with your pastels. And that's great for grasses, which will be in our other class. I think that's tomorrow, actually. So we'll be doing a lot of that kind of thing tomorrow. And that's where you use the tips of your pastels because you want to get those finer lines. But when you want to use, fill in, larger areas, you really want to have shorter, stumpy pieces like that you can just kind of run across your page. So it is sad to break them, but you just got to do it sometimes. This one is a beautiful, I think it's a Mount Vision brand. So big, chunky, fat ones. They come in all different sizes. This is a sort of a purpley blue. It's a beautiful mauvey sort of colour, which is rather nice. So see how I'm creating a variation of different tones of blues there. Here's a little purple one. Probably should have been put down before that one because it's slightly darker and much creamier. So with different brands, you'll find that some are feeling creamy and lush and others are a bit drier. So interesting how different brands are so different. The other one I picked up was Australian Grey, which I mentioned in the notes. Again, that's a full stick. So, and it's an Art Spectrum brand. It's a lovely one too. It's sort of not quite white, but it's got this lovely, I don't know, Australian colour. So I like to use that wherever I see the lights, and then I can pop my whitest white in later. So there's that option as well. And then I've got quite a lot here. If you don't have as many as this, don't stress. That's a very, very, very light blue, almost white. And then I've got a little pale yellow. So you'll see around the edges of these clouds, the first one we're just painting, it's got sunshine on there. And sometimes rather than using white, it's nice to add a little bit of warmth. And the very light yellow just glows nicely. And then of course I've got white. So this is my white. Now we'll save the white for last. So I always like to put my white on at the very end and just use that for the final highlights, because that way it just means that the brights come in at the very end and they're not going to be contaminated with other colours. So that's my palette, okay? Now, as I said, if you don't have all those colours, please don't worry. We can make it work with less colours for sure. Some of these in here you may not need. As long as you've got your dark blue, your mid blue, a little bit of grey and a couple of lights, you'll be fine. Okay, doesn't that look lush on the dark black paper? I love black paper, it's so beautiful to work on. Okay, so that's our little palette. And I keep them all in a container like this because then I'll know which colours I've used for this particular painting. And it means that if I come back tomorrow and need to finish something off, then they're all sitting there and I don't have to remember which blue I used when I've got 50 other ones over there. So that's why I keep them separate in there. It's like a little palette really. Okay, so we'll pull that aside. So we're working in landscape format today, and we're going to fill the background in first. So there'll be a lot of rubbing, okay? We're going to do lots and lots of rubbing to get all that pastel to hang on to the paper. There'll also be a lot of dust, so make sure you've got a cloth or a paper towel nearby that you can tip off your dust onto, and try not to blow it because it does get all over the house and all over your clothes and all over the floor. And it's easy to clean up. It's water soluble, so it'll wash out quite easily. But, you know, I just don't like cleaning basically. So the less cleaning, the better. All right, so let's get started. What we're going to do is start at the top of your page with your darkest blue, which is this beautiful ultramarine blue. So you don't want a dark, dark blue. You don't want anything that's too dark, but this is a lovely heading towards dark, but not black. Okay, and you want a short stumpy piece like that. So not a long stick. If you've got a long stick, you might have to break it. And we're just going to run this across the paper. So using it on its side and just pulling it across like this. I like to run across because I feel that skies go in a sideways kind of motion. It's wide and it's expansive. So I want to do big wide marks and bring it all the way down to about 3/4. Okay. So just wiping that over, you might find you might have to press a bit harder to get it to sort of stick to the paper. And you'll have a lot of holes in the paper like this, and that's because the paper's got texture on it. So because it's got tooth or texture, it's going to show through beneath this first layer of pastel, and that's why we're going to blend it. But before we do that, we're going to get the other blue. So that's the next lightest blue that we talked about using in our sky. And we're going to start at the bottom with the lighter blue. And so you might again have to break it. I'm hoping that this isn't too long. And do the same thing starting from the bottom. Okay, and we're going to overlap the two blues in towards the middle there, because what we want to try and do is create a beautiful gradual blend from the dark down to the lighter. All right, so in the middle here where we've overlapped, it's obviously a little bit thicker, and then as you come down you add a bit more. You'll have a lot of dust on your page most likely, depending on the pastels and the paper you've got. Okay, so they're my two blues on my paper, and now we're going to push them in with our fingers. I like to use probably all my fingers to do big areas like this. If you just use one finger, it's going to take too long. So I probably use 3 of them, and they'll end up very blue. So make sure you've got a little cloth like this one. It's a bit dirty, but I've got it wet on one end, and that means when my fingers are dirty, I can wipe them on the wet end like that, and then dry them on the other end before I pick up my pastels again. So that's a really good thing to have nearby. And if you don't have one of those, then a wet wipe or something like that will do the trick. Okay, let's get some fingers into here. So I'm going to start at the top, and we're going to pull from left to right and right to left all the way down, just gently making our way down the page all the way to the bottom. And we're going to try and merge these two tones of blue together. So let's start at the top. We're going to go across like this. And if you've got enough pastel on there, it should be filling up that tube quite nicely. And if not, we can always put more over the top. So we're just going to do this. See how that's lovely. Now you don't want to be going up and down or round and round, because that's not how skies are. Skies are wide and smooth. So we want to do wide, smooth marks running across your paper like this. How lovely is that? Now I quite like how that's looking. I sort of like the stripy sort of effect in there. It's not too bad. But if you wanted to smooth it out, so you could potentially leave it like that if you were happy to do that. And again, that would depend on the color of the paper that you've used underneath. So if you've got a lighter paper, you might find you want to put more pastel down just to fill it up a bit more. If you've got darker paper, then you might find the same thing. If you want to get this lighter blue to be lighter on a darker tone. If you've got a lovely dark blue paper, then maybe that's just doing exactly what you need it to do. And that's where the paper color comes in really handy. So, you know, potentially you could use a plain blue paper and not have to fill the background in. It really just, you know, you can just then bang the clouds straight on. But I like putting the pastel underneath the clouds first, because then the blue from the sky sort of contributes to the pastel. So if you feel like you need to add more pastel, by all means do that. So you can actually repeat that process. You can grab your darker one again and just drag that across just to get a little bit more pastel onto your paper. As we said yesterday, you can get quite a few layers down. And then I can do the same again with my light one. So coming across here, you see all that dust collecting on there? Lots of that dust. And they're just not all the dust kind of gets into the paper. So I've got quite a lot of dust all around my edges there. And again, I can just put my fingers in there. 3 fingers is great when you've got a big space like this. And just pull it across, start from the top and work your way down, and just go left to right, and big smooth movements as you're coming across your paper. And you're creating this really nice gradual blend from dark to light. Now I'm going to leave mine like that. I quite like how it looks a bit stripy, sort of suggesting clouds already. But if you want to smooth it out, then by all means carry on and keep doing that. So you can see now I've got quite a lot of blue on my fingers. So I'm going to wipe those off on my cloth. dry them at the other end. And now I'm going to tip up my little board here and just tip it all the dust off onto my towel that I've got sitting on the side of my table here, because it just gets in the way and I don't want it to go all over my desk. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a beautiful blue sky. That's a lovely, lovely start. Okay, so I'll pop those back into my little palette there. Now we're going to study this picture and figure out what we need to be doing first. As I said, I want to leave the whites for last. And a good white to have in your kit is a schminky. So a schminky is a brand of pastel, and those pastels are really, really creamy. They're really thick and creamy. They're quite lush, and they're really beautiful for especially your whites, because you can just kind of touch it on. I'll do a little example. Where's a bit of white going to be? About there. You can just touch it on and it'll sit on the surface and glow. It's quite beautiful. Some whites that are a little harder kind of pastels might be harder to sort of get to stick. So the creamy ones are really beautiful for those final highlights. So that's a Schminky brand, SCHMINCKE, I think. And you can buy them individually too. So if you can only afford one, and they're about $9 each for a stick, which is about the size of that, get a white one. That's what I've always had in my kit. It's a little white Schminky, because they're just beautiful for those little highlights. All right, so we're going to look at this cloud now. We're going to start off with the darks, okay? So the darkest area on here is down the bottom, and we're going to use, I think we might go for this grey. I don't want to go too dark, although that is a pretty good match, isn't it, that grey there? And if you've only got one grey, then we'll use that. And you can always pop a bit of the dark blue that we've just used into that to darken it a bit more. So let's stick with grey. And what we're going to do is mark out where everything sits first. And while I'm jumping ahead of myself here, if you have a white or a light pastel or charcoal pencil, just grab that. And we're going to sort of draw out the shape of the clouds, all right? So just follow my lead here. And we're just going to do a little light outline. We just want to outline it really gently. And it doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same, because you know what? No cloud ever is. So your clouds can be the way you do them. And we're just going to follow your line across here. All right, we're just doing the outline at the moment, because we kind of want to figure out where we want to put our colours. Now over on the right hand side, we've got a bit of a patchy spot there with a bit of wispy cloud over that sky. So I'm just going to mark in that area there. I don't know if you can see that very clearly. I'll press a bit harder so you can see it on the screen. Doesn't mean you have to press harder though. I'll just go over that again to make it a little bit easier to see. So we're going to cover up a whole lot of this sky, which is a bit of a shame really, because it's such a nice sky, but anyway. Okay, and then we've got our little wispy white bit here. And then we've got some softer wispy bits up there. I'm just going to press lightly there, because I don't want a really hard outline that I can't get rid of later. That's the other thing to consider, is try not to make the outlines too heavy, because they'll be harder to cover up or take out later on, if you don't want them there, that is. And a little bit of blue down the bottom there. So that's pretty much the map of where we're going to kind of fill in, I guess. Now the rest of it will just be working with our tones. So what we're going to do is start with the darks and work towards the light. So always I like to leave the light for last. It's not the right way or the wrong way, it's just the way I like to do it. So what we've got is a fair bit of dark in around this area here. I'm just going to mark that in so you can see what I'm talking about. We've got a bit of dark cloud sort of coming around through here. And then we've got a bit of dark cloud coming down that way. So what we're going to do is grab your dark grey or your dark blue, whatever you have that's the darkest, and just very lightly. So we're just going to do very light coats, because what we're going to be ending up doing is blending a lot of this with your fingers at the beginning, and then as we work towards the end, we'll be blending less, but we just want to get some of this dark down onto your paper. We're just smooshing some of that down on there. If you find or you feel that it's too dark and too stormy looking, then maybe change it to a blue. It's your cloud, so you can really do whatever you want to do. So I'm just putting a bit of dark through there, a little bit through there. The intention is to kind of layer the colours over each other and push them around with our fingers and create these really soft, fluffy sort of effects. I'm going to bang a little bit up there in the top of the right corner as well. It's quite dark sky up there, but okay. So I've got some dark on there. Now next I'm going to pick up this blue, I think. Let me see, what's that going to do? Sometimes you've got to test these things and see how they look. So that's a blue, but it's more of a grey blue, and it's the same sort of tone as what I've just used. But I just want to smoosh a little bit of that around in here. This forward cloud in the front here is quite dark. And what's going to really make that pop afterwards is when we put the lights in. So if it's feeling a bit dark, don't stress, because we can brighten it up a little bit with some lights. But I just want to get this kind of a grey blue in there. I know it's a bit hard to see what's happening because it's similar to the background colour. Smoosh some of that on. The idea is to get lots of pastel onto the paper, and then we can use the fingers to push it around. So down here in this area, I've kind of filled up most of that grey area in the front with the two tones of blue and grey. So the blue is a little bit lighter than the first grey. And then I'm going to put a little bit over here on the side and then up through that right-hand side. And then somewhere over here, see where it's the darkest grey where we'll put the first lot, and then as it sort of comes around the edges of the dark grey, we're getting into that lighter grey. So pretty much filled up all of that area. Now we're going to start to sort of push it around a little bit. So just start up in the right-hand corner, and because these clouds are fluffy, we want to do fluffy movements. So this is where you're going to start to get that cloudy sort of effect, is by the way you move your finger. So when I'm doing it, I kind of like to do these little, I don't know, round sort of squiggly movements with my finger. And I like to change it. So I'm going clockwise, anti-clockwise, kind of curly, I don't know how to describe it, curly, fluffy sort of movements. Okay. And what's that's doing, hopefully, is creating this fluffy cloud kind of feeling, because we want to sort of merge these greys together so that they sort of, there's no hard lines. It's a bit hard to see, I know, on the dark background there. It'll come alive when we put some lights in. So just doing these little soft, fluffy sort of movements with my finger. Okay, I'm going pretty quickly. You might want to go slower than that. But what we're doing here is we're picking up some of the blue in the sky that we put down first, and we're mixing it in with the grey and the darker blue, so that it's creating this really lovely shadowy sort of feeling. Now where that darker grey is, we need to kind of push some of that in, and we can always add more if it's not dark enough. If you feel like you're losing that darkness, we can add more afterwards and build it up a bit more. But the secret is to keep your movements random. So when you are doing this kind of thing in a natural environment like clouds and tomorrow grass, you want to keep your movements very random. Try not to make patterns. Try not to have everything looking the same, because in nature, that's not what normally happens, especially in clouds. My clouds are looking a bit brown. So just random little squiggly kind of movements with your fingers to push all that in and lose those sharp edges. So you don't want any hard lines until we get to the end when we put the lights in. So you can see I've got a lot of dust now sitting on my page, quite loose dust. You can kind of try and push it in, but often it won't kind of go in. It just sort of sits there and becomes more annoying than anything. So you'll want to tip that off as well. So it's just a bit of a mishy-mashy mess, really. Okay, off that finger, tip off my dust. There we go. So you see, you can hardly see what's happening there, but we're slowly building up the depth of that cloud. Now, I feel like I want to add a little bit more dark in here, so I'm going to use this dark blue that we used on the sky and just get a bit more depth happening here. So I'm going to press a little bit harder and just create a bit more of a dark background. So when you want something to shine and be bright, see the very bright edges around these clouds, that white shine. So the sun is behind the clouds and it's catching the edges. That's why it's got that beautiful shine around the edge. But when you want to create some light in something, you need to have enough dark so the light can shine. And that's one of the many secrets that I've learned doing any kind of art really, is when you want, if you want something to look lighter, often you need to add darks around it, and that will bring the light out. It's quite interesting. Sometimes you can keep adding white and white and white and thinking, why isn't this thing, looking bright? And often it's because whatever's around it needs to get darker so that the light is more obvious. So I'm just putting a bit more dark blue in there. Going to add a bit more grey into it. So my cloud will probably look quite stormy because I've got this greeny grey colour going on. Okay. So the idea is to get a fair bit of pastel down onto your page, and then we can push it around with your fingers. Lots and lots of blending in here today. So we'll be doing a bit less blending tomorrow. A bit more up here on the right hand side. Add some more dark blue to that. The nice thing is if you muck this up, you can always just go over it or wash it off and start again. Okay, so I've got a fair bit of dark blue and dark grey down on there. Where's my other grey gone? What I've done with it now. There's a lighter one. Try that. Oh, that's interesting. That's a little bit lighter. These greys are warm greys. I probably should have picked up cooler greys. So warmer greys will have a bit more red in them, and they'll look a bit more earthy or brown perhaps, whereas a cool grey will be more blue. So a warm grey like this will make the clouds look sort of dirty and stormy. That's okay. We can have stormy clouds. So I'm just putting a bit of the warm grey in around where those lighter, where we had that lighter blue before, just to get a bit more depth in there. So what I'm trying to do is build up the variation of tones inside these clouds. And you can see I haven't gone anywhere near the whiter clouds yet because we're working with the darks first. Okay, So I want to make sure that we stay in the darks first and just build up that beautiful, rich, thick, dark cloud. And then once we've got enough darks on there, the lights are going to pop. It's almost, sometimes I feel like I've got to do all this hard, yucky part first before I get to add the lights and you know, the joy. Okay, so that's pretty much probably enough of the darks. I'm going to pick up this little purple one. So if you have a little purple one or maybe a lighter blue, I'm just going to add a little bit of that in here. So notice where, see, we've got some light down in there on the left-hand bottom area. So I just want to add a little bit of this purple in around there. Okay. Now we're going to smudge all this in soon, so it's all going to sort of get a little bit messy and lost, but that's how pastels work. You've got to build up your layers to get it all sort of happening. So I'm going to pop a bit of my purple down there. It's not my lightest light at all, but I just want to get a little bit of mid-light in through these clouds to create some interest. Okay, around the top here, I've got a little bit of light as well. So we can always add light to the over this later. And that's the plan. Okay, so a bit of purple up through here. And then see up here on the right-hand side, it's getting lighter around the edges. So we're just sort of mushing a bit of that in there. Just try to keep it fairly random with your marking as well. So when I'm doing this kind of thing, I try to sort of twist some light on Jeannie, that'll help. Try to twist my hand a little bit so that it creates a different shape, I guess. So try to keep the shapes fairly natural looking. So it's tricky because you just want to keep doing the same mark or holding the pastel in the same direction or way all the time, but try your best to vary it a little bit, and that'll help to create a more natural look. I just thought I better put my lights on. That's much better, isn't it? Good. Okay, so I've got a bit of my purple in there. That's this pale mauve kind of colour. It's a bit dirty. Give it a wipe. There we are. Mauve. Beautiful light purpley sort of colour, which is another stormy cloud kind of colour, really. So add a bit of that. And then I've got this lighter one again. So this is a lighter bluey purple colour. I'm going to pop a bit of that in as well. Remember I said save the white for last, so I'm not using white, but I am going to put this where I can see some light. So this is a big chunky stick. I'm going to try and just use the end of it. I haven't had to break it so far. And I think because it's so fat, I'm able to get quite a wide mark with it because it's got a big chunky end on it. It's not the skinny stick like the other ones. So I'm just putting a bit of this light, just noticing all the little light sections that you can see in those clouds. Okay. And smushing some of it around. Again, trying to keep your mark fairly random. And we'll leave those little sharp edges, you know, the sharp edges across the middle there where the sun's catching the very edge of those clouds. We'll do that at the end with the whites, but we can use these lighter colours for the lighter sections of the clouds in advance of that to create this beautiful range of tones. Okay. So just following the pattern of the clouds, looking at where the light is. And then out around the edges up the top there. So up the top here, we've got all this beautiful lighter cloud. And we can always pop white in there afterwards to brighten that all the way up. Just building up the beautiful levels now. And I'm going to pop a bit of that over in here. So just a little bit. Don't have to press too hard, because we can always add more over the top. And so popping some up in the top up here, those lovely little white fluffy ones. Now up in the top there, we won't be doing a lot of blending because you can see quite a bit of the sky through those clouds there. So we don't want to blend in and lose all that blue. We want to keep these ones fairly transparent. Okay, so I've got a bit of light in there, I've got my darks in there, and then we're going to get our fingers into it. So if you've got enough pastel on there now, we can start to sort of push it around a little bit. Now, when you start pushing it around, you want to really think about where you're pushing it, because, you know, we don't want to go in and just mush it all up and make it all the same color, which is what can happen really easily. And if it does, then that's okay, because you can come back and add more. But it is a good idea to sort of think about where things are, and that we don't want to, you know, blend it all too much. A little bit, but not too much. So you've got to be a little bit careful about where you're blending the pastels together. So let's start up in this right-hand corner. Now I can see the top of that on the picture is dark blue sky up there, but on my screen it's clouds, so we're missing a bit of the top corner on the screen, but that's okay. So just grab, just using one finger, and just press lightly, and we're just going to do these soft little squiggly marks again to push in that darker sort of area, which it all looks sort of a flat grey, or although not so much on the screen, there's a bit more detail in there. Now, as you do that and work your way down through that darker area on the right, and then very gently just start to blend in towards the lighter colours. So can you see how that's now starting to blend in without pulling too much of the dark into the light? I mean, you still want to merge them lightly, but just press lightly, don't go too heavy. Yeah. And do these little squiggly marks. And when you're doing those little marks, it means that your finger is pulling that pigment around in different directions, and it's creating this lovely random sort of natural fluffy cloudy effect. Okay, so when we did the sky, we did big wide sweeping smooth marks, but now we're doing these fluffy little soft cloudy marks. You can see how that's all now starting to look more cloudy because I'm blending it in gently. I've still got a lot of dust sitting there, but I can tip that off after. And don't press too hard. If you press hard, it'll go muddy. It'll go kind of dirty, and it'll all start to look the same. So just go lightly, because we want to kind of use some of the blue in the background on the sky, but we also want to try and keep the brightness of those colours on the surface. Okay. The edges are all soft and wispy, so don't worry about smudging those a little bit. Just going very gently and gently working your way down the page. We'll come back with more light to brighten up the light bits, so don't worry if you dull them down a bit. What we're building here is a little foundation. Okay. But again, keeping that finger going around in these little random sort of directions. Looking at the shape on the picture. So noticing, you know, how this area here, we have white in there, and there's a little bit of white up here, and then we've got white around the edges there. So that's what you're trying to do when you're moving your finger around in those areas, is just sort of pulling this lighter colour over into this darker bit here. Don't worry, we can add more light. Just going really gently. You've got to do clouds gently, like when you're starting off like this, because They just need to be blended really, really gently so that they look natural. Okay. Little random movements, squiggly little movements with your finger. Round and round the other way, and reverse it. And then in some spots where you want it to be heavier or thicker, you can press a little bit harder. And if you want it to be lighter and softer, just lighten your pressure. See how that's all starting to look really cloudy? It's great. That's what we want. That lovely cloudy sort of effect. It's all sort of merges in together, but not quite. So I'm just going to work my way around the page basically. And then we'll assess it and see where we're up to. So as I said before, when you want something to look lighter, often you need to have dark around it. So it takes a little while, takes some patience. When I'm doing clouds, I always expect them to be amazing, first go, but they're not. It always takes a while to build up the levels and the shapes and tones. So just going gently. I'm liking the way my blue and my grey are kind of blending in here. That's again creating even more volume and interest in shapes. So by doing this, we're kind of pushing all the colours together. It's creating a really nice little blend of colours. Up here around the edges there. By keeping your touch light, you're allowing the different shapes and I don't know, texture, I'm going to say, to sort of show through. The harder you press, the more mess you'll make, or the more it'll just get pushed in and become a blob rather than all these beautiful, gentle blends. Just going to go up the top corner there and softly rub that around. I don't want to blend that in too much because I want to keep some of the sky showing through. And this little one in the middle, this little fluffy one, we'll brighten that up with a bit of light and white soon. But that's a good base. We can fill that up with the middle, the light purples. So I've got quite a lot of dust sitting on my paper now, and I need to tip that off. So I'm just going to do that. Lovely. Just have a look at everyone's faces. How's everybody going? All good. Yeah, lovely. Keeping up, or do you want me to hold off for a bit? Keeping up? All right, great. Okay, so that's a really good start, isn't it? It's very dark in here, but I quite like that. If you wanted to make that even darker, you could add more dark blue or even a dark purple if you wanted to have a very stormy sort of a cloud. I'm going to leave mine as it is because I quite like that combination of the blues and the greys and how that's working. So what we need to do next is start to look at the lights. Not white yet, but I've got a very light blue. Actually, this is the light blue I used before. So I think I might add a little bit more of that again, just to emphasize my lights a bit more. So because I've blended it in, now if I add this over the top, it'll sort of just sit on the surface and shine a little bit more. Can you see how that's shining a bit more? And so now we're going to, yes.
I'm sorry.
You're right.
I don't have anything between white and light blue that I use for the bottom of the sky.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Okay. Have you got a very pale yellow?
Yeah, I do.
Lovely. All right. So we'll save the pale yellow for last. That can be the light around the edges. And we'll use your white to do these little highlights now.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. All right. So based on what Louise is doing, I'm going to pick up this one, which is not really white. It's a very light blue. It looks white. So let's do that and see how we go. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of smush this around over the surface to get a bit of a glow going on. You can see how that's now starting to shine on the edges like that. And I've just sort of run it around. I don't want to blend it in too much. I might dab it here and there just to soften off some of the edges, but I really like the way that that's glowing on the top like that. It's quite nice. So let's try and do that. And to do that, you just want to press fairly lightly. You might be lying your stick down flat on your paper like that and using the whole side. If you don't want to do that and you want to do a smaller area, just tilt it up and use the tip of it or the end of it and give it a little rub. So where you want it to be brighter white, for instance, we've got a little white patch just there. I can press harder and use the end of my stick to get that shiny white coming through. See how that works? And by not pushing it in too much with my fingers, I'm retaining that lovely feeling of cloud on cloud. So we're trying now to create that lovely layering of the clouds using the lightest blue or a white if you don't have a very light blue. Okay. So see how that's just sitting like that on the surface. Now, pastels are beautiful for clouds because you can get all this gorgeous texture happening. So when you press lighter, it just sits on the surface and you can still see the grey or the blue below it. And I can just dab it lightly like this. So don't push it in with your finger, just dab up and down, dab, dab, dab. And that'll just soften off the edges like that. See how that's now starting to glow? That's what you want to get. So looking for all the little bits of glow or the little bits of light within the clouds now. Okay, so just finding some there. There's like a little round shape here. So that'll be, you know, just a little bit of light shining through behind that bit of cloud there. You'll never look at clouds the same way after this, I promise you. I can't take my eyes off clouds now. They just intrigue me so much. But see how that's starting to shine now? It's getting a beautiful, beautiful glow around it. And this is why we need to get the darks down first. So now we can get those lights in there and start to build up the light bits. So again, just using the tip of your pastel or the edge of it and rubbing it onto the paper. And because we've got textured paper, it's going to hang on to it really nicely. Okay. And trying not to blend it in now. We want to keep it clean on the top. This is where you can get your beautiful pure colours happening. See, that's starting to build up there, down there in the bottom corner. Just move that over a little bit so you can see better. So just touching it on. Takes a bit of practice. You might not get it right first go round, but that's okay. If you're a beginner, then you know this is challenging. It's tricky because it's all about how you hold the pastel and it's all about how you apply it onto your paper. So it's as if if you're used to painting with a brush, then you know it's about how hard you press with the brush, which shape brush you're going to use, how much paint is on there. So if you want more paint, you can use that terminology, just press a bit harder and you'll get more brighter pigment to sit on the paper. If you want a very soft, gentle kind of effect, then just press lighter. So see how that's happening around the edges here. So where I want that really bright white section, I'm just going to press a little bit harder and then it's whiter. And you'll notice that with clouds, there's random little spots that are brighter and then other bits that are not. So just working our way around the painting with your white or your very light blue or whatever you've got in your box. And then we'll use the very pale yellow, or if you haven't used white yet, we can use that at the end for the shiny, shiny bright bits right on the edge of that cloud there. which is the first thing you see when you look at it, isn't it? So just running my white around here. Okay. Now in this section here on the right hand side where we haven't put any clouds yet, we've got a bit of sky showing through, but there's white wispy clouds in there. So if you want to just gently rub your pastel around in there, again, try to keep your movements fairly random. We don't want hard lines, so resist the urge to press really hard and get a sharp edge. Just try to use the soft end of a pastel rather than the sharp edge to get that lovely soft wispy feeling. See how that's now looking nice and wispy? If I wanted it to be a bit whiter in one part in the middle there, I can just press a bit harder. Beautiful. And because clouds are never the same shape, they're always different. So you can have a bit of fun just playing around with where you put your whites and how hard you press, getting different, range of tones, brights and darks and so forth. Lots of fun. And same as when you were blending with your finger, you want to try and use your pastel in a random sort of pattern as you're pushing this through. Gorgeous. All right, so coming up into this section now. I'm not sure that my shape is exactly the same as the picture, but that again is okay because we don't have to have it precise. We'll do some more proper drawing later in the course in the week, and we'll be doing some grids and drawing shapes and things like that with the rooster and the plums. But for these natural things like clouds and grasses, we really don't need to be too precise. So I'm starting you off nice and easy. Now, if you get to a part where maybe something like here, you think, oh no, I don't want that so bright right there. It's looking too much like that bit. So I want to sort of make them slightly different. Just get your finger and give it a little dab and push it in a bit. So that'll dull it down. So if you're feeling like some area is too much or too like another bit that you just did, and it's really easy to make patterns. I can see I've done that already myself because we just keep doing the same thing. And it's the way that we sit, it's the way that you hold your pastel, it's all of those things. Sometimes if you want to get a bit of variation, turn it upside down. You can always flip it over and work on something upside down and change the way you're kind of doing everything. And that will really help to change the look of what you're doing and the patterns that you're making. So I'm now working upside down. Hope I'm in the right place. Pressing hard in some spots where I want it to be bright white and then softer in others. Bring some of those little bright edges out into the sky, make them a bit wispy so that you've got soft edges and fluffy little cloud bits. If there's a bigger area of the tone or colour you're using, then you can put the whole stick down on the page and push that around. So play with that too. Play with using the end of your stick or the side of the stick to get different shapes and a different feel. So I'm going to turn that back over now. There we go. If you feel like you've done too much of the light, then you can just dab that in, or you can pick up your dark again. So don't be afraid to grab a little bit of the dark blue and put that back in around if you feel like you need to add it again. You can do a similar effect with the dark as well, just to soften off those edges. Beautiful. And I'm just going to dab that in a little bit so it looks If you feel like you want to blend it a little bit more, you can do that too. So you can always get your finger in and just run it around gently like we did initially to create a bit of a blend to soften off some of those edges. Tip off your dust if you're getting too much dust. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in with a bit of grey. I feel like I need to add a bit more dark, just so that it's not all looking too same. So don't be afraid to do that too if you want to darken some of the areas off. Clouds are tricky. If you're feeling challenged, don't, it's normal. They're not easy to do. It takes a little while to sort of get used to it. Okay, so I'm going to finish up on that top side and then work my way around on the left now. So I've done the right side pretty much. I'm going to come over to the top on the left. So remember, we put a bit of light down on there. I just want to come back in now with this almost white and wispy, a little bit of that around too, just to create a nice range of tone throughout that little bit of cloud at the top. Some spots are sort of whiter than others. So I'm just using my stick to press down and do that. This one in the middle, this bright white one, that's quite lovely, isn't it? So I can add my white onto that one. Still want to keep the edges fairly wispy and soft. So again, just pulling a little bit of that out to the side with the stick, going gently, gently. And I can brighten that up even more with my white on my pale yellow afterwards. Then I'm coming down the side here. I'm just going to add a bit of white or light down through here. Now on this side, we've got a little bit of dark, like cloud right up against that light cloud. So I've got a bit of a hard line there, which is interesting. That's fun. That's good. Gives us some variation in our shapes. Then I've got this little tip here, which is very white. So I can touch that up again afterwards with my lightest. I'm going to get some of this in there now. I've got a bit of shine down through here on the left side. It's like peeking through these dark clouds with a little bit of light popping in there. Beautiful. Now, with this edge, so this very shiny edge where the sun's catching on the very edge of that cloud, what I want to do is use this particular light that we've been doing work with so far and run around the edge with it. And then I want to go over it with my very pale yellow or my whitest white, whichever you've got in your box. Okay. So when we're going to go around the edge of this, we want to do a hard line or a sharp line. I'll just show you an example on here. So if you've got your stick of pastel, you should be able to find a sharp edge somewhere, either on the end or on the side, but usually on the end, so you can get a hard line like that with it. Okay, that's the kind of mark you want to be able to make. And when we go around the edge of the cloud, I'll just show you this. So have a look at what I'm doing. Put your edge down, and then we're going to do this kind of soft, sort of wiggly shape, because you can see the edge of that cloud is not a hard, sharp line. It's not all the same width, and it kind of stops and starts, doesn't it? So we've got some bigger, wider areas and then lighter areas. Now to achieve that, we want to sort of, what I do is kind of twist my pastel a little bit, but I lift it up nearly off the page and then I press down again. So we're trying to create a variation in our edge. So we don't want to do that because that's all even. What we want to do is create an edge that's a little bit broken with harder marks in some places and lighter marks in others, so that you get a more natural edge like that. And so again, to do that, just using the edge, so find a little edge on your pastel stick, whether yours is square or round, you'll find an edge, and we're going to kind of twist it. So by twisting it, we're creating different widths. A little bit is thin and then it gets thick and then it gets thin and thick, and then lifting off and then pushing down again, lifting off, pushing down, and just creating a variation in the width and the shape. Okay, because what's happening is the sun's catching in different sections on the edges of that cloud. So it's not an even hard line. It's all very broken. So that's what we want to achieve. All right, let's have a go at that. So using the current light pastel that you've been using to put all your lights in, I'm just going to, whichever way you want to start. I'm left-handed, so I should probably start on the right, but I'll go from left to right. Okay. And we can always come back and touch that up. So just gently, gently, just going around the edges there. And it's not a perfectly round top either. So I'm trying to, I should go the other way, then you can see better what I'm doing, I think. You can see. So it's not a perfectly round edge. It's a very jagged sort of shape. Just want to go like this. So we've got thin bits and push harder to get your thicker bits. Up through here and like that. So you've got a very sort of jagged line that has different sized edges on it. Does that make sense? And I can come down here and just carry on a little bit more. So you can see the sun's shining down behind the clouds and it's catching that edge, and it's quite lovely. Now there's also a little bit of white in the sky just through here. Put a little bit of smushy through there. Another little smush up here. Just little wispy clouds that float around. And in the next cloud thing painting that we do today, we're going to do lots of wispy stuff. So there won't be as much blending and pushing and hard lines. All right, lovely. So I think that's looking quite nice. Now, if you feel like you need to add more darks or lights or whatever you want to do, now's the time to do that, and really have a look at where all your lights are sitting in relation to your picture. Now, as I said, if it's not exactly the same, don't stress, doesn't matter. Or clouds, doesn't matter. Because now we're going to pick up our lightest pastel, which could be your like a really white, schminky white, something like this one, which doesn't look that much whiter to what I already had, or a very light yellow. So the light yellow is going to be beautiful to get some of the sunshine on that edge there. And we're going to do a similar process, but go over the lines that we've already done. So whichever one you've got, I'm going to try with the yellow and see how that goes. The only risk with yellow when you're using yellow in a sky is mixing it too much with blue, it's already there, and making green. So we want to keep this really sharp and clean and not blend it in too much, because otherwise we're going to end up with the green, because blue and yellow make green. All right, so let's do a similar thing on this shiny, sunshiny line that we just did with our yellow or white. And again, I'm just going to do exactly the same thing and just kind of go in broken lines. Try not to have a hard continuous line, because that's not what's there. And we just want to get some sunshine in there. Running around like that, and then around to the edge there. See how that just makes it glow beautiful. Beautiful. Go a little bit thicker in a couple of spots just to, again, be careful not to blend it too much with the blue. It's a bit tricky. But if you have a creamy pastel, this yellow is not too creamy. It's not as creamy as a schminky would be. Probably should have grabbed a schminky, but anyway, then it'll sit beautifully on the top. And now I'm just going to brighten up some of these little white areas. I'll try to with this yellow as well, just to get a bit of sunshine in there. The yellow will warm it up and make it more sunny. See how it just glows? It's amazing with these yellows. There's one that's even lighter. It looks nearly white, but it's got just a touch of yellow in it. And often that's a better option than white because it just does have such a lovely warm glow. So I'm going to pop a bit of this just in a few places, not too many. I just want to use it to brighten up some of those little white spots or lightest spots to get some of that beautiful sunshine in there. So just look for some very light spots, mostly around the edges. And again, be careful you don't make green because there's blue on the paper already. So you don't want to push it around too much or it'll go green. Ideally, you just want to be able to dab it on and let it sit there without pushing it in too much. Depending on again, on how creamy your pastel is. This one is not that creamy. So I'm just trying to get, really bright bits to sit on the surface like that. And you might have to push a bit hard to get that to work. It's literally just putting crumbs of pigment right on the edge. That's nice, isn't it? That bit there. It's a shame most of it's dust and I'll have to tip it off. I might try a bit of that up in here too. Just pushing a little bit harder. This is what happens when you push hard sometimes. Just end up breaking the pastel and it turns to dust. Beautiful. So just a touch of yellow in a couple of spots is all you need. When you're putting lights into anything, you don't want to overdo it because then it sort of dilutes it and it doesn't look bright anymore. So just be very selective with how much you use. I'm just going to come back over here. This top left cloud, I'm going to put a bit more dark blue in there just to make it a bit more wispy. Wispy that one off a bit more. Lovely. So you can do that. You can come back in with your darks if you want to, just to darken up a few spots if you feel like you want to go darker, or you might want to add a bit of light. I could try this lighter blue just for a bit more volume inside this cloud here. Like that. So now, because we're not blending anymore, you can kind of just use your pastels to create a bit more volume or texture if you want to. You might not need to, depending on how your cloud's looking and how happy you are with it. So lots of options and different things you can do. And the purples are lovely, but dark purple will make it very stormy. So I often can't decide what colours to put into clouds. I want to add greens and reds and things, but often it doesn't work very well because they look too stormy. But yes, you can come back in with your light purples or your darks. Just swish it around a little bit here and there to create some really lovely, soft fluffiness. So it's your cloud and you can make it any way you like. Beautiful. Okay. So that's that first one for the day. We might take a 5-minute break if that's okay, and then we can get stuck into the second one. How does everyone feel about that? Do you want to show me your clouds? I might stop the screen share and we'll come back to the group and have a look and see how you went, and then we'll have a break.
It was very challenging.
Was it?
I found it so, but you know how sometimes if you come back and look at it tomorrow, you go, oh, now I see the cloud.
Yes.
I'm hoping that's going to happen.
Yeah, it probably will. Probably will.
Yeah.
Karen.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that looks great. That looks really great.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, very nice.
No, I found that really
Very
nice.
nice.
Yeah.
No, it will. It'll look way better tomorrow, I promise. And then you might do a little bit more, you know. How'd you go,
Yeah.
Janelle? Nice. I love your glow. That's really glowing, isn't it, on that dark paper? Very nice. Got to turn your sound on. And Louise, how did you go?
There you go.
I found that really, really, really challenging.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I don't know. I'm not just making excuses because I still think it probably wouldn't have made that much of a difference. But my pastels are quite chalky. Like you can press it down and leave your colour. I can't.
Okay, what brand have you got?
Rembrandt. My husband's
Yeah.
an expensive one for me.
Yeah.
The
Rem-
and so
yeah.
now it just feels like I've just got chalk all over this.
Okay, show me.
Oh, I don't want to. It's so bad.
That's pretty good.
Oh, wow. That's not
Pretty
bad.
good.
That's
Fine.
Yeah.
I feel like the bottom is just one big fat cloud.
Yeah, and that's the
Like,
picture.
there's
I
no-
feel like that too. Yeah, that
Okay.
bottom part is quite dark and heavy, but you can lighten that up if you want to come back in and put some more lights over it. If it'll let you,
Yeah, it's not really.
it might not. So the Rembrandts, that was actually the first brand I bought too many years ago.
Yeah.
They were in Eckersley's, I think, and they were quite expensive. And I thought these are great, but they're very hard,
Yeah.
very hard.
And then
And
I felt like, even though you said don't blend, I had to because it's just leaving like these really hard lines just to
Yeah,
try and get it in. It's,
yeah,
you have to like draw it in to
yeah.
get, and it's not really.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the difference. That the Rembrandts are very hard and they're great for drawing. So you'll find them good tomorrow when we're doing grass.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
you'll find them really good for the rooster because it's all like line mark and it's not so much soft work.
So which brand do you use? What do you?
Well, my main go-to is Art Spectrum. And that was really only because I worked at Art Shed for a few years and I was able to get them easily. They're a nice brand. They're Australian. They've got a lovely range of colours, and you can get the extra soft round, which are these guys, or you can get those little square ones. These are soft, and then the squares are extra soft.
Oh.
So, yeah, both are great. Both are great. The extra soft are nicer because they hang on to the paper better.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Does that make sense though? That like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hear you. I do.
it's like I've had to scratch in the colour and it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, they're very hard. I tend not to use, I haven't bought Rembrandt since, to be honest.
Yeah.
I find them too hard. Yeah, but that's okay. You've still got good pastels and they'll be good for some things. And that's the thing with pastels. The harder ones are really good for drawing and doing line work and fine work. So if you want to do really fine sort of work, they're great for that. But the softer ones are better because they're thicker and they're more lush and they'll hang onto the paper better and you can blend them around. They're more buttery. So yeah, different pastels are very different.
So you really need both, depending on what sorts of like landscapes and things you might.
Yeah, I think Art Spectrum's a really good all-rounder. If you can only manage to get one kind or one set, Art Spectrum would be my pick for sure. Because I've been using those for years and it's all I used for years and years. And the only reason I've got other brands is because I discovered a couple of them at the Pastel Expo about 3 years ago when they had different brands there that you could purchase. So I tried a few then, and that's when I found the Blue Earth is beautiful, but they're very creamy. Mount Vision are lovely. The Schminkies was my dream pastel when I first started, and they are beautiful, but they're really, really creamy, and they fill up. It's my noisy husband opening the cupboard over there.
Hi.
Husband.
The schminkies are really creamy, so they fill the paper up quickly. So they're good if you just want to do a couple of layers and not too much blending. So yeah, they're all a little bit different, but I would say Art Spectrum is probably the best all-rounder. And they're
That's good to
quite
know.
affordable. So they've got a really lovely set of 40 half sticks, which is a nice range of colours, and they're about $110, I think. But they're a stick about that size, and that's the one I recommend for people to get, because they just seem to do everything.
I've got the little half sticks.
Yeah,
They're that big.
yeah.
The
Yeah,
little
the
Art
same, the
Spectrum
red
ones.
one. But what brand are yours, Karen?
You've got
Mine are the
Art
Art Spectrum.
Oh, sorry, and Janelle, what are
I'll wear the Art Spectrum ones. The little,
okay, gotcha.
the little pack. I've just got a little pack of half
Yeah,
sticks.
you got the 20s.
Mm.
Yeah, I've got the 20s. I probably should have got more, but
But they're enough too. Like that's
Yeah,
a really
yeah.
good starter set.
yeah,
The set of 20s, and they're about $55, I think.
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. So that would be my recommendation when you're starting out. Would be a really good set to get.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of build up from there. Yeah, yeah. I just buy them as I see them, or I've just ordered some from Soft Pastels in New South Wales. So softpastels.com.au, that's an online pastel store. They have everything pastel. Fabulous. And there's also the Pastel Expo later this year in August, September in Caloundra.
I saw that. Yeah,
Oh, Lordy, it's going to be glorious.
you'll be in heaven.
I will. I actually went the first time they ran it about 3 years ago, and I did a voluntary thing. So I volunteered to be a helper. So as a volunteer, you get to do 2 workshops, so 2 full day workshops that you've got to pay for, but then everything else you get for nothing. But you can actually sit in on all the demos and all the classes and just help.
Wow.
And it's a fabulous 4 days of just pastel heaven. They have demonstrations, they have paint arounds, there's workshops, there's plein air, there's classes. It's just fabulous, and
Wow.
lots of product. So you get to see different brands and try them out, and yeah, it's fabulous. So they've got people coming from overseas as well as Australia to teach.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you've got $750 hanging around, but it's for 4 days, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
And
Awesome.
even with it being more expensive, it's not going to be, sometimes you go to free things in the city and you can hardly move and you
Yeah.
can't see things because there's too many people there.
Yeah. No, this has limited numbers for each workshop, and it's all at the Caloundra Event Centre, which is a really good centre.
Sounds really good.
Yeah, so I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Oh, that's good.
That'd be amazing. Anyway, let's go have a 5-minute break.
Yes, lovely.
And we'll come back and get stuck into the next bit. You'll find the next one much easier, promise.
Excellent.
Right, see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lovely. Okay, so we're going to get started on the next part of today's class. So this part is going to be a bit quicker, I think, and we're going to be doing our cirrus clouds. Cirrus.
Serious. They're very serious.
Very serious clouds. Yeah, so these ones are wispy and soft, and they're kind of guided by the wind. So there's not as much blending going on in this one. It's more about wiping the pastel over the page and kind of letting it sit there, hopefully, depending on the pastels you've got. So hopefully, Louise, yours won't be too challenging.
Deeper, creamier ones. Should I give them a go?
Why not? Yeah.
Are these the ones from the kids? Yeah. I mean,
Just
maybe
see.
pastel or something.
Yeah, sometimes the cheaper ones are okay as long as you've got good paper. So yeah, if you've got the good paper, they may work quite well.
Yeah, I'll give them a whirl, even if it's just the highlights or I don't know.
Yeah, worth a try. See how you go. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again successfully. Dear. Let's see how we go. All right. I'm going to play nice. So far, so good.
We're looking good.
Ooh. Yes.
Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Ah,
There she is.
bingo. Lovely. Now, just make sure that focus stays nice and still so it doesn't wiggle around for you. There we go. We're on. Lovely.
Lovely, lovely.
Lovely. Okay, I'll just mute everyone if that's okay. But as I said before, don't be afraid to ask any questions or speak up.
Sure.
Okie dokie. So here we go. I've got a new piece of paper all ready to go, sort of taped down. This bit of tape doesn't want to play because it actually tore on my last one. So that's something to be aware of. Just stick your tape onto a bit of fabric or your clothing before you put it onto your paper, just to you know, get some of that stickiness off it before you stick it onto your paper, because it can tear. And luckily that was not anything worth framing. But if it was, you'd be brokenhearted. So we don't want to damage your artwork at all, whether it's good or bad, doesn't matter. Because the good thing is, if it's bad and you don't like it, you can actually wash your paper and with a brush and water, so just a normal paintbrush and some water, you can wash all of that in and use it again. And sometimes you get some really cool backgrounds. So it's not always going to be wasted. So don't feel like you can't, you know, use the paper again or anything like that, because you can. And I do it all the time. And you do get some really lovely effects when you wash in those backgrounds. You could even do it deliberately if you wanted to, and create lovely backgrounds for your next piece. So this next one we're going to do is the cirrus clouds. And you can see it's got the same kind of background sky. So we're going to do the sky the same as we did before with our blues, our darker blue at the top, working down to a slightly lighter blue at the bottom. And then we're going to be using mostly just lighter pastels to get that beautiful soft wispy cloud effect. So this one shouldn't take quite as long as the other one. So we'll start off again with our darker blue at the top of your page and just pulling that across. I really like filling up my pages with pastel. Just get my tape out of the way. And again, wiping that across. And of course, this will depend again on what colour paper you've got. If you've already got a blue paper, you might not need to do this. I quite like putting pastel underneath the clouds, because then some of that blue sort of shows through on the clouds. And it's nice to have that nice little mix of the blue coming up through the clouds, because it literally does anyway in the sky, doesn't it? It shows through, so it doesn't hurt. So our lighter blue now running across the bottom there, you might hear that scratching on the paper, and that's because it's got that textured sandpaper kind of effect on it. Okay, so I've got my two blues and I'm going to use 3 fingers and push that in. Probably need to do another coat. So again, depending on how hard you press and what kind of pastels you've got will depend on your coverage. So I obviously need to do another layer, but that's okay. So just pulling that across all the way down and blending those two blues in really well together. So it just kind of gently merges from dark to slightly lighter. Okay. Beautiful. And then I'm going to pop more dark blue across the top here. Pressing a little bit harder so I get some more of the pigment to stick. Of course, that always makes more dust. And a bit more light blue across the base as well. Just pulling that up into the dark blue. And we get that lovely gradual blend. And then again with your fingers, just rubbing that across, nice big wide marks or smooth wide actions to blend that in. Tomorrow's class involves a little bit of sky as well, but only half the page, and then lots and lots of grass. So I like doing grass, it's fun. We're also going to be doing some sketching at the start of the class. So you want to have your art diary and your charcoal ready. Okie dokie, so pushing that in. Lovely. That'll do. Lots and lots of dust sitting on the side of my paper and very blue fingers. So I'm just going to get my cloth and give my fingers a clean and then tip off some dust. So then we'll be ready to add our wispy clouds. Just banging that on my little table over on my little cloth over there. And there we go. Lovely. A few crumbs there. So just rub those in. All right. So now what we want to look at is the format of this particular picture. So interestingly, on my printed version, the sky is a lot darker and there's a lot of blue sort of around the edges of all the white cloud. That's not so obvious on the picture on the screen, which I'll show you because it looks quite different. So that's my screen and that's my print. So they're very different, aren't they? And this is the not the problem, but the challenge, I guess, when you are using reference photos for your paintings, is figuring out, well, what do I want to do? Do I want a dark sky? Do I want a blue halo around my clouds? Or do I want to do it more pure, which is what I can see on the screen? And you can do it any way you like, really. It's up to you. But, you know, it just shows you how very different things can look when they're on different medium, paper or screen. So I'm going to probably be looking at my screen mostly as reference for this one, but we can still use this as the shape. So remember last time we very softly just drew up where the basic shapes were. So just very lightly with your pencil. I'll do it darker so you can see what I'm doing, but don't press too hard because we don't want hard edges. We've got a bit of cloud there. And you know what? You can make these clouds any shape you want. So you don't have to stick to this particular picture or shape. You can do your own thing. I've got a bit of like a keyhole shape over here on the right. It's interesting. There's a bit of a wispy bit up above that. And then on the sides here to the right-hand side bottom, it sort of comes out in a bit of a wave-like, I guess, from the right to the bottom. So it gets wider as it comes across the base here. And then there's a few wispy ones in the middle. Okay, groovy. So what we're going to do pretty much is probably just use two light colours. And I'm going to suggest a light blue, which probably would be this one. Yes, I'm going to have to break that. So this is where it gets a bit sad because you buy these beautiful sticks of pastel. This is an Art Spectrum. So that's the brand that I use most of. And I quite like it. And they're quite affordable. They're a lovely quality pastel. And then they're easy to use. So you need to peel these labels off. That's the only downfall is there's plastic sticky labels. If they're older pastels, they get a bit annoying. And then just give it a break. Like that. So then I've got a half stick and more dust. Just tip off my dust. Okay. So I've got my light blue and then I want white. Okay, so they're the two pastels we're going to use for this particular one. So hopefully you've got a light blue that's a little bit lighter than your sky color and then a white for the whitest parts on the clouds. Beautiful. Now we're going to start with the light blue and put the white on afterwards. So we're going to kind of smush the light blue around where all these lighter clouds are sitting. So because I've broken it now, I can use it on its side and I just want to do it quite softly. So nothing too hard, just gentle rubbing so that we just get a very soft, light coating like that over the sky. And you can sort of wispy around the edges and not have a hard edge or a very definite shape even though we drew a definite shape, that was just to sort of mark out where we were going to put it. But just soften off those edges a little bit. You can add them in a bit more or make it bigger or smaller or whatever you want to do. And then again, so it just rolled around on my page. See how it picks up the blue from the background? So that's not always a bad thing. You can use the same side or roll it around and find a clean edge. And just again, very softly wisping that around there. Wisping across here. So this one won't take very long at all. And then we're going to wisp around on here. So when I say wisp, I mean just really lightly popping that over. Like that. I'm going to bleed this one off the edge of my page. I don't like that silly keyhole shape. I'm just going to soften the edges off of that. And then these wispy ones down the side here. So I've got a little stick of pastel lying flat in a horizontal way. And I'm just going to do this because that's kind of the shape of the cloud, isn't it? So always look at the shape of whatever it is you're painting and move the pastel in that direction, I guess, to try and imitate, you know, the shapes that you want to make. So doing it this way, using the side of the pastel, I can still sort of do these soft little lines without making hard lines, but I still get that lovely shape that's going on in there. Gorgeous. And then coming over here, a few little bits that poke out across there. There's a little bit there. So these clouds are easy. If you want to do an easy sky with a few soft little clouds, you can just wisp them across like that. And that's where pastels are glorious for clouds, because you can actually make these really lovely, lovely wispy sort of shapes. And they're quite nice. So that's all you need to do for that part. I'm going to tip off my dust again, and then we'll add our white. Okay. So adding my white. So this is a very creamy white. I know you don't all have creamy whites, so I might use this one that's not so creamy. It's not quite white, but it'll do the job. All right, so this is my very, very pale, pale blue. But white would be ideal if you have it. So what we want to do now is study this picture and see where the clouds are whitest. So inside this area here, you can see on the left cloud, there's some very definite whiter areas. So what we want to do is put your white pastel down. If you've got a long stick, you might want to break it and just sort of gently rub that around to create the whiter areas of this cloud. Okay. I'm sort of going to rub it nearly all over everywhere, but when I want it whiter, I'm going to press harder. So when you press harder, it makes the colour more intense and kind of holds on a little bit tighter to your paper. Okay. See, I'm not actually lifting this off the paper very much, kind of leaving it sitting on there and just pulling it around softly, softly like that. See how that's making it really beautiful and cloudy. I can just press a little bit harder in a couple of areas where I want it to be brighter white, and then let it sort of sit more softly on the surface where I don't want it to be too white. So putting that other blue down first has given us a nice base. It means that the white doesn't have to work too hard to create all the different tones, and we can just sort of sweep it over and then let it be whiter in some spots and then not so white in others. And again, you can make it quite random. So it's up to you where you want it to be whiter. There's really not any specific direction of sun in this particular one. It's a bit hard to tell where the sun's coming from. Maybe from behind us and it's looking directly at the clouds, because this cloud here is very white through there. So maybe there's sun coming straight towards it. Don't know. But it's always a thing to note. We'll move over to this one now. and do the same kind of thing. So I'm just going to whiten that up and then press a little bit harder if I want it to be whitest. But yes, noticing where the light is coming from is always, always crucial to your art, because that's going to define your shadows and the direction of light and so forth. Okay. Wisping through. Now, don't be disheartened if you haven't had a good day and not enjoyed the clouds. They are hard. They are really hard, and it takes lots of practice to get it right. That first one we did had a big dark area in the front, which is a bit off-putting because it's quite heavy and dark. But have a practice with other clouds. Get on Google, look for some more pictures of cloudy skies, and just, you know, print some off or grab them and have a try, because it's good to practice. And once you've got your head around it, it's quite a lovely thing to be able to do. So don't feel disillusioned. I know it's a really difficult thing to do first time round. I know I struggled for years and years. Been doing this for a lot of years. So you're not born knowing this stuff. You have to practice to get it good. So I'm just wisping around here, whitening up where I want it to be much whiter. And you can do that. You can just press a bit harder with your pastel. If you've got a soft, creamy one, you won't need to be pressing quite so hard. If you have art spectrum like me, then you might need to do a little bit of elbow grease to get it to hang on. See how these are just soft and wispy and sitting on top of the sky nice and gently. Now, if you want to blend, you can get your finger in here just softly, very softly, hardly touching. And softly, softly pull that through. Okay. By doing that, you're going to wisp off those edges nicely. So you see how they go all soft and wispy? You can just very softly pull that out, and that gives us a bit of the wind. Then you can see which way the wind's blowing. So that's really nice. So we've got a bit of wind in there. It's all blowing in from right to left. Come over to that other cloud and put your fingers into that if you want to, and just gently, gently blend it around. Soften off the edges. So you can really vary what you do. You can make them wispy and soft and not blend at all, or you can blend a little bit, do a bit of both. Whatever makes your heart happy. But just have a play. Doesn't hurt. You know, you can wash off this one and have another go. Have a practice. Cloud photos are everywhere. They're easy to find. I'm going to come down into this right-hand side now and just start putting some lighter marks down through here. Just pulling that across to the bottom. A few little wispy bits through there. You can add a few more if you want to. See these little interesting, there's an interesting shape happening through here. It's like stripes coming through there. So if you pull your pastel across and just do some marks in that direction. So use the edge of it, not the tip. So we don't want a hard, sharp line. We just want soft sort of uneven marks that come through there. And using the edge of your pastel, you'll be able to achieve that, not pressing too hard. And so that's an indication also of which way the wind is blowing. And you can bring the other ones across into there. And then if you want to put your fingers into it, you can just pull it across like this. So what I'm doing is lifting my finger off, pulling it across. If you want to, you can wipe your finger off in between each pull so that you have a nice clean finger to put back down and not adding more pigment as you go. And then these ones can kind of go that way a little bit. Just for some interest, just makes it more interesting. doesn't it? The harder you press, the more you're going to blend the colour into the background. If you press lightly, then it shouldn't blend too much. It should just kind of push it in enough to stick. So that's nice. That was fun, that bit. I like doing that bit. And you can just keep playing with it, keep pushing it around, add more if you want to. Yeah, fun. Clouds come in all shapes and sizes, don't they? They're just different all the time. And it's lovely to study the shapes and the colours that you see in them. All the different tones. It's amazing how much grey and white you can find in clouds. I just put a bit more of my lighter blue from the sky colour through that to sort of soften it off a little bit. You can do that too. You can add a bit more of the blue just to soften it off. Add a bit more white to brighten it up in a couple of spots. So here, for instance. Through here. Just to get a bit of variation in tone. Push that around, got a lot of dust on there now, so I can tip all that off. So that's your wispy clouds. They're fun to do. So I think, you know, if you want to put clouds into somewhere and you're not confident with doing the cirrus fluffy ones, these wispy ones are a really good option. You can come back in and whiten up different spots. Just create a really nice contrast. Shiny bits. Just tipping off my dust. So you can see I added some whites in there and soften off over here a bit more. Add a bit more white up here. Beautiful. Fun, fun, fun. Hopefully you enjoyed this one a bit more. But as I said, it is challenging. I know it's tricky, but it's all about the pressure. It's all about the pastels that you've got, and then the pressure and how you apply them to the paper. You know, whether you press hard or soft. I always start off soft and then I can go harder if I need to. But don't go in hard because you can't undo it. Well, you can, but you know, it's easier to start off soft and then push it a little bit harder if you have the urge. So that's that beautiful wispy cloudy sky. I think I enjoyed that one better too. Pop a little bird in just for fun. Or two. Lovely. I'm going to come back over to the participants screen now and see how you went. I'll get you to unmute yourselves if you don't mind. Beautiful. There we are. Okay, verdict.
Much easier,
Good.
but still not particularly, you know. But
That's
still all right.
lovely.
You like that?
Yes. That's
Okay.
lovely.
That grew.
Yes.
Well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, nice. I like that very much. Yeah, you did a great job on that one, Louise. Nice.
Oh, thanks. There were a lot of touch-ups coming back.
Was that the cheaper pastels?
No,
Ah.
actually I ruined a piece of paper because they're oil pastels.
Oh, right. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
so they
good.
just kind of did this.
Ooh,
Yeah,
different. That's interesting.
yeah, it wouldn't blend.
No, well done. That looks good. Happy, happy, happy. How did you go, Karen?
I actually found that a bit harder.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's nice though.
Couldn't
lovely.
sort of get
Yeah.
the fluffy. I felt as though I couldn't get the fluffy.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so lots more practice.
Practice, practice, practice.
Practice, practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Janelle? How did you go?
Oh, I think my first attempt at the last class was better, but
That's
Oh
nice.
wow, I like the strong blue. in the sky.
Yeah.
I haven't
yeah,
done
that's
a lot
lovely
since
blue.
the last
Yeah.
class. So again, it's practice, as you
It is.
say.
It is practice.
Definitely.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you all did a lovely job. So thank you for
Aw,
sticking with
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. No, it was lovely. And yeah, so tomorrow we're going to do grass, which will be a lot different.
Yay.
And, yeah, lots of loose marks and not so much blending. So that should be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it will be fun.
fabulous.
Will be
All
great.
right. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. See you
Yeah.
tomorrow.
See you guys tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye now.